Notre Dame brings back one of the best defensive line units in all of college football this season, but they're going to need to be even better this year if the Irish are going to make a run in the college football playoff. That's next on Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. And today is Thursday, August 8th. And thank you for getting your day started right here by making this your first listen of the day. My name is Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports. And this show is free and available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. If you are watching along on YouTube, this is your reminder. Please like the video below, subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Or if you're listening to the podcast, please rate the show 5 stars, leave a review, and subscribe there as well. Quick reminder before we get rolling, I'm going to be answering your questions in another mailbag episode tomorrow. So this is your last call. And if you want to submit your questions and get featured on the show, you can send yours in the YouTube comments. You can tweet me at Locked On Irish, or you can DM me on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Okay, we are just a little over 3 weeks away from the start of the Notre Dame season, and I can feel it. I'll be honest with you, though, I kind of hate this time of year because we are so close to football season, but it's still not football season. Like, we still have a few weeks left to go here, but we're getting there, and as we get closer, I'll be here with all the preview content you need, and today we are going to continue with the position preview installments and take a look at the defensive line. I've already previewed all the position groups on the offensive side of the ball. Now we're going to switch over to the defense, which has a chance to build on what was one of the best defenses in all of college football last season, and they need to be even better this year if they want to be truly special and make a serious run in the college football playoff, and it starts on the defensive line. When I look at this unit, I think it's the best unit on the entire team. When you top to bottom, you look at the starters and the potential breakout stars behind them, this group is loaded. They have the potential to be one of the best defensive lines in the entire country, and Notre Dame needs them to be that good in order to build on what they did last year and be even more dominant this season, particularly at the start of the year when Notre Dame plays Texas A&M, because it looks like the offense is going to struggle a little bit. They are going to have to count on their defense. Their defense came through many times last year, but then there were some games where they didn't, like the Clemson game or on the final drive against Ohio State. That cannot be the case this year. They are going to rely heavily on their defense. But let's look at the starting lineup here on the defensive line. You look at the 4 starters, those are 4 grown-ass men playing college football. I've said it all offseason long. Every single one of these guys is in their 5th or 6th year of playing college football. They returned 3 starters: Jordan Botelho, Riley Mills, and Howard Cross. Mills and Cross make up one of the best defensive tackle tandems in the entire country. I would say the best when you look at what they've done in college, and they could both be playing in the NFL right now. I think when Notre Dame retained those guys, once Howard Cross and Riley Mills made the decision to come back to Notre Dame, that was one of the biggest stories of the entire offseason. Now, it doesn't come with quite the same fanfare as when you pick up a big-time recruit or a big transfer or anything like that, because it's not the shiny new toy. But don't get me wrong, these were huge, I guess I can't say additions to the team, but it was very good to have them back because, honestly, I did not think they would come back, specifically Howard Cross. I looked at him like, what more could he possibly do in college to improve his stock? It's not like his height and weight is going to change or anything like that, but he's like, you know what? I'm going to come back to Notre Dame, and I would say that one of the great things about NIL is it makes it a lot more enticing for some of these guys to come back and play college football when they're actually going to be playing paid to do it. So when you look at what Cross and Mills did last season, they combined for 112 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, 51 quarterback hurries, and 2 forced fumbles. And that is at a position that is not really conducive to putting up big numbers. Usually when you look at the defensive linemen that are putting up crazy stats, it's usually on the edge because they have more chances at the quarterback. They're usually facing like 1 tackle, maybe a tight end. Whereas if you're playing on the interior, you've got to deal with the centers, the guards, and the tackles all coming at you at once. But these guys were still able to put up big numbers last season, and I expect them to put up even bigger numbers this year. Then on the edges, you've got Jordan Botelho, who, like I said, is going into his 5th year. And by all accounts, Jordan Botelho has matured on and off of the field, and he looks poised to finally break out in his last season with the Irish. He was pretty good last year, finished with 4 sacks, although 2 of them came in the bowl game against Oregon State. The dude just loves bowl games. He was I think he was the defensive MVP. Either way, he had a big bowl game in the Gator Bowl a couple years ago. So if he can just play like that every single game, the sky is the limit for this defensive line. And something that's been talked about a lot with Jordan Botelho. Not only has he matured just from early on in his career when he was getting into trouble all the time, physically he looks a lot different. I think even Botelho admitted as much, saying that like he's got better sleep habits, better eating habits, and now physically he's more ready to go than he's ever been. So that is definitely something to keep an eye out for this season. And then you got RJ Oben, one of Notre Dame's biggest additions in the transfer portal. He's going to be playing the strong side and a position. Played for Duke throughout his career up until this point. He is a very, very talented pass rusher. He had 5 sacks last season for the Blue Devils. He gave Notre Dame's offensive line fits in that game. And if you watch RJ Oben closely, it's not like the prettiest thing in the world. It's kind of all over the place. But man, he just is relentless on the defensive line. And it's got to be so exhausting if you're the tackle trying to keep up with him, because even when it seems like the play is over, he doesn't really have a shot at the play, he's still going. The arms could be flailing at some points. He's still driving away. So a fun player to watch, and I'm really excited to see what he can do this season. He did not get quite the same fanfare as Riley Leonard did when he announced his transfer to Notre Dame, but that's obviously because Leonard plays quarterback. But I think that there's a real chance that at the end of this season, when you look at the 2 most impactful transfers that Notre Dame added this offseason, both of them, the top 2, could be from Duke, which is a very interesting little tidbit, especially when you consider Notre Dame is going up against Duke's old coach, Mike Elko, in the season openers. It's not just the starters, though. When you look at who they have behind them, they've got several really talented young players who look poised to emerge. Defensive line coach Al Washington said that this group can go 11 to 12 deep this season. And sometimes when a coach says that, I'm like, okay, eye roll. I don't believe you. But I actually believe it with Al Washington. You kind of have to do that in the modern day and age of college football when you consider that Notre Dame is looking to play a 15 to 16 game season. They're going to be playing all over the country. Guys are going to get hurt. You need to be able to go really deep on the defensive line specifically, and it looks like Notre Dame has the horses to do that. Behind the starters, you've got Boubacar Traore, Jason Onye, Donovan Heinisch, and Josh Burnham. They make up for a really strong second unit. Josh Burnham is a guy that Al Washington has referenced repeatedly throughout camp so far as a guy who's really starting to emerge. I'll talk more about Burnham in segment 2, but he's someone to keep an eye on. Unfortunately, Notre Dame was supposed to have Gabriel Rubio this season. I think he's going to be able to come back maybe after the midway point. He suffered a fractured foot in fall camp, which is unfortunate because he's a nice piece on the interior. But even though Rubio is going to be out for the majority of the season, Jason Onye is going to be a senior. He looks like he's ready to finally make his mark with the team. Donovan Heinisch, younger brother of Kurt Heinisch, one of the more surprising Notre Dame players in terms of what he was able to do in his career. And Donovan looks exactly like him, so I think he's going to fit in well with this unit. And then you've got some younger guys behind him like Bryce Young, who's a true freshman, 5-star guy who I don't think he's going to play a ton this year, but when he's out there, man, he looks like a freak. He's 6'7". Everyone keeps talking about how he continues to grow every single day. So he might make an impact this season. Junior Tuihalamaka is going to be in his 3rd year with the team. He's going to compete for reps at Viper. And then you've got Armel Mukum, who I'm not going to lie, I kind of forgot about him. And then I remembered that he was sort of the backup plan to Keon Keeley when he decommitted from Notre Dame to Alabama. He basically has come in and taken over on the interior as like the new 4th guy now that Gabriel Rubio's been out, and he's been impressive. So they're deep and they're really talented from top to bottom. And Notre Dame needs their D-line to be exceptional in order to reach their goals this season. Because when you look at the best teams in the country every single year, they all have great defensive lines. Look at what Michigan did last year. I know it's not fun giving Michigan credit for anything, but look, man, their defensive line was unbelievable. And they went like 8 guys deep. And when they brought in like their 2nd or 3rd guy off the bench, it didn't even matter. They didn't skip a beat. They were so good. They were old. They were experienced. And that is a huge reason why they went undefeated, won the national championship last season. And then prior to that, the reason why Georgia and Alabama had dominated college football for as long as they did is because they always had the best defensive lines. They were routinely putting guys in the NFL, and not just putting guys in the NFL, putting first rounders in the NFL every single year at that position. And that is a big reason why they've had so much success. And I think a big reason why is because when you, as an offense, cannot stop 4 guys from getting in the backfield every single play, there's nothing you can do on offense. It doesn't matter how good your quarterback is, your running back, your skill players. If you cannot block 4 guys in front of you and they're in the backfield, there's nothing you can do. And it sort of hides any other deficiencies you have on the defense. Notre Dame had a really good unit last year with Gervonta Jean-Baptiste, Cross, Mills, and Botello, but they need to be even better this season because there were moments, specifically in the Clemson game, where they did get beat pretty consistently. I mean, Phil Maffa ran for 4 touchdowns against them last season. That cannot happen this year. And I think a big reason why Notre Dame could be better is RJ Oben and Jordan Botello. Gervonta Jean-Baptiste was a big surprise last season. Like, we thought he'd be good. He was really, really good. But is he going to be like an elite pass rusher? Well, RJ Oben could do that. And if Jordan Botello steps up, if he takes a leap in his last season, that just changes everything because you know what you have in Cross and Mills. They were dominant at the end of last year. They need to be dominant every single game this year. If they are able to do that, and then you get 2 guys coming off the edge who are just running like a bat out of hell, there's not going to be much that opposing offenses can do against this team. Last year, Notre Dame was able to make up for the fact that they didn't really have that elite pass rusher by mixing guys around, mixing up the blitz packages with Bertrand and Leofau, but that's going to be a little bit harder to do this season with some inexperienced linebackers. So they're going to have to rely a little bit more on those grown men on the defensive line to get in the backfield more. Now, don't get me wrong, Al Golden is going to get creative and he's going to scheme up some opportunities for his linebackers, but I just think that they're going to rely a little bit more on the defensive line this year. And I feel like they're ready to be that sort of to carry that burden for this entire defense and the team because I feel really confident in what Jordan Botello is going to do. I think RJ Oben and Josh Burnham create a really strong tandem at the strong side end position. And Cross Mills are NFL players playing in college right now. They are crucial to the success of this defense and the team. And it's clear that this team is going to have some limitations on offense. So they're going to rely on their defense and specifically their defensive line early and often. And I feel like this group is capable of handling that and exceeding all of the expectations that we have about them going into the season. Obviously, the expectations are high if I'm already saying that they're one of the best defensive lines in the entire country. Mark Streeman always says that he wants his program to be offensive and defensive line driven. Right now, it seems like the defensive line is going to have to pick up some of that slack and keep this car moving, and I think they are ready to do it. All right, coming up next, I've talked a little bit about the young guys in the role they could play, but should we be concerned about their lack of experience? Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch, with great last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. Whether you've been planning to go to a game for weeks, or if you're feeling spontaneous and you want to hit up the nearby ballpark, Gametime is the perfect place for you. I actually went to a Dodgers game last night, all thanks to Gametime. Had a great time, and it was cool. I got to watch the Dodgers play the Phillies, who are the best teams in baseball. Had great seats for a great price, all thanks to Gametime. It is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat on your phone before you buy, but my favorite thing about Gametime is the pricing shows your total cost up front, and you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So one of the biggest questions I have about Notre Dame's defensive line unit heading into this season is which young guys are going to emerge and become playmakers? Because for as much age and experience that Notre Dame has with their frontline starters in the D-line, there's a serious lack of both with the backups. And by the way, that's more than okay. Like, it's almost impossible to have a group of frontline starters who are old and experienced and then have backups behind them who are also old and experienced, because the backup old and experienced guys would transfer so that they could start at another school, especially in the modern era of college football. Notre Dame has some guys who are a little bit older. Behind them, a guy like Jason Onye, who's going to be entering his senior season, redshirt junior in terms of eligibility, but a lot of inexperienced guys as well who are going to be counted on to make some plays this year. And I think that is going to be something that a lot of people are watching for this group. So let's talk through some of these backups. Let's start in the interior. Defensive tackle, right now you got Jason Onye, Donovan Heinisch, and Armel Mukum until Gabe Rubio comes back from his fractured foot injury. Onye only averaged 11 snaps per game against Power 5 opponents last year. I think coming out of the spring, a lot of people thought that he might have a bit of a breakout season because he was one of the most impressive players during last spring practice. And I'm not talking about the most recent one. I'm talking about last year, the spring practice the year prior. I think he made some significant strides from being someone who was, not even a factor on the field to someone who at least could come in and contribute a little bit. But now he's going to be asked to do a little bit more than that because he's going to be the first guy off the bench for both defensive tackle spots. He's going to be able to come in and replace Mills or Howard Cross whenever one of those guys needs a breather. I think if he can get to 20 snaps a game this year and still be consistent, I think that is a really big addition for Notre Dame because he wasn't able to do that last year. If he's able to do that this year, I think they're going to feel a lot more comfortable with the depth on the interior. Then you've got Donovan Hinish. He's undersized, but he's an absolute bulldog. He had a big sack last season against NC State. I don't think many people expected him to play at all last year, but he did. He cracked the depth chart, and he was out there making some plays when Notre Dame needed him. He looks almost exactly like his brother Kurt, a little bit smaller than him, but they've got the same number 41, the eye black, the face mask, the no gloves, all of that is the same, and I love it. I thought Kurt Hinish was one of my favorite players to come through Notre Dame's defense in recent years because I don't think anyone really expected him to have nearly the amount of success that he did, and I think the same could be said about Donovan. Low 3-star recruit. He's already making some waves, getting on the field earlier than people expected. Now he's going to be counted on to do a little bit more this season. I think he's certainly capable of doing it. Obviously, you wish he would be a little bit bigger, but there's nothing he can do about that, and he makes up for his lack of size with his heart. So keep an eye out on him. Then you've got Armel Mukam. He was been basically thrown in for Gabriel Rubio. I don't think many people expected him to fit at all in the rotation this year, but he's impressed so far in camp. He was the backup plan once Keon Keeley decommitted, and now he might be an actual player, which is not something I would have expected to say a few years ago. He has not been playing football for very long, but it seems like the development that he has made so far throughout his career at Notre Dame has been really impressive, and he might get some snaps this season, although I would say that most of that is going to come against some inferior competition. I don't think that Armel Mukam is going to be relied upon against some of the better teams on Notre Dame's schedule. All right, let's look at strong side end, the backups, Josh Burnham and Bryce Young. Al Washington has absolutely raved about Josh Burnham so far in camp. Here's his quote about Burnham, one of many, but here's one. Quote, Burnham is having a hell of a camp and a hell of an offseason. His body is transformed. He's special, end quote. And then when some of the reporters tried to ask Al Washington about Bryce Young and some of the other young guys, Washington made sure to bring up Burnham again to make it clear that, hey, we can talk about the young guys like Traore and Bryce Young, but the focus needs to be on Burnham because he has made that much of a move this offseason. He's going to be a very serious player this year because I think you can make the point that Josh Burnham might be better at stopping the run than RJ Oben. RJ Oben wasn't really asked to do it all that much when he was at Duke. Like I said, he was sort of a pure pass rusher with the Blue Devils. He's very good at it. He has, I believe, 14 sacks in his career with the Blue Devils. So we know he can get after the passer, but can he stop the run? That was a question that a lot of us had about Javonte Jean-Baptiste last season when he was coming over from Ohio State. Well, he answered all of those very early, and he was barely coming off the field pretty much from that Ohio State game on. He was that good and that reliable in the run game as well as getting after the passer. If that's not the case with RJ Oben, that's okay. Notre Dame certainly wants him to do more than just rush the passer, but if they need to bring in a guy like Josh Burnham, I feel like the coaching staff trusts him to go out there and make some plays and do that. Plus, I think Burnham's going to get after the passer a little bit as well. So I feel very good about the strong side end position and what those guys can do. Like I said, Bryce Young, physical freak, true freshman. I think he's still got some development to go, but he's just one of those guys where if you put him out there, he might be a mismatch against a tackle. If he just has to pin his ears back and make a play, sort of like what Boubacar Traore did last year against USC, I could see it happening. All right, now at Viper, speaking of Boubacar Traore, it's his time, right? He's not ready to start, but he's ready to make some serious plays, and Al Washington said as much, quote, referring to Traore, quote, he's ready to roll, rip that Band-Aid off because he can go. He's special, like he's a really good player, end quote. What Traore did to that right tackle on USC last season was honestly hilarious. He didn't even really make a move. He just straight up burnt that dude and sacked Caleb Williams, forced fumble. I don't even know how Williams was able to recover that. Then, Traore celebrated a little bit too much on midfield, but it was one of those plays where whoa, that guy can go. And it's a player that a lot of people were talking about during last year's preseason camp. Well, it seems like since then he's developed more as a true pass rusher, a true defensive end, and he's ready to go this year. I think that he could seriously challenge Patel for some snaps, but if Patel is taking that leap, then he might just be asked to come in and get after the passer in obvious passing situations, but I do think that Traore is going to have a big impact this year. Then with Junior Tuihalamaka, I'll admit, He's somewhat been forgotten about. He was a big-time recruit when Notre Dame added him out of California. I know that he was a very high priority for Marcus Freeman, but he was a little bit he wasn't quick enough to play linebacker, so they decided to move him over to Viper, but he's not as big as some of these other guys. So it seemed like he was a bit of a tweener, but Al Washington said he's developed a lot at the position ever since he made that move over to Viper, and he's going to have an impact this season as well. So you've got Botello, Traore, and Tuihalamaka, 3 guys who can contribute at Viper, and that's a really good place to be. I think that the Viper position as a whole is better than it's been in years, because even when Isaiah Foskey was at Notre Dame and he was setting the career sacks record and all the things like that, they didn't really have any talented guys behind him. Botello wasn't ready or anything like that, so I think that as a whole, the Viper position is in really, really good shape. So another question I have is, who's going to emerge as the best pass rusher in this group? Will it be Oben? Is it going to be Botello? Or could Traore come in and steal the show? Because for as good as this defensive line is, they lack that one guy who can just come in and dominate whoever is in front of him. Like, there's no Stephon Tuitt on this roster. There's no Justin Tuck. There's no Isaiah Foskey, even though I had my, I don't want to say like concerns or my frustrations with Isaiah Foskey is that's fair to say, because it felt like against the best teams on Notre Dame's schedule, Foskey was not as dominant as he should have been. So I do think that Jalen Sneed, Kingston Biliamuasa, some of the linebackers are going to be able to help out and contribute getting after the quarterback. But you really need to have like an elite edge rusher if you want to be one of the best defenses in college football, so that way you really only need to rush 4 guys. Again, I think that Oben or Botello, they're going to be able to get after the pass rusher, but can you do that going up against some of the best offensive lines in the country? Because if Notre Dame wants to make a run in the college football playoff, that is what these guys are going to have to do, and it's going to be something that I'm monitoring throughout the season. My guess is that RJ Oben is going to be the true pass rusher of the group. He's going to be the best one, but it could be Traore, and maybe Botello finally just puts it all together and he wreaks havoc, because I know that if I were blocking, I would not want to block Botello. He is so physical and so violent, and now that he's sort of harnessed all of that rage that he had when he was a younger player and it was a little bit chaotic, now if he can just harness that and apply it on the field on Saturdays, there's a chance that Botello could get his sack count up to like 6, maybe even 7. So right now, it doesn't look like they have an elite pass rusher, but that could change, and that could change the dynamic of really this entire defensive line. All right, coming up next on Locked On Irish, how will this season shape the future of the defensive line? So I've talked a bit about the young guys already, and they are awfully important because Notre Dame is going to lose a lot on the defensive line after this season. I said they've got 4 frontline starters who are all graduate seniors. Well, they are all going to be gone after this season. So young guys who emerge this season could change the course of next season. We've talked about Burnham, Traore, Onye, and Hinish a lot. That could be Notre Dame's starting front next season, depending on what happens with Gabriel Rubio. Maybe he's in there instead of Hinish. But it's a pretty solid unit. But I feel pretty confident that Notre Dame is going to look to spend a lot of money on a transfer D lineman or 2 this offseason, because theoretically, they shouldn't have to spend the bulk of their NIL budget on a transfer quarterback next year like they have done the past 2 years. And instead, they're going to look to add some really quality veteran defensive linemen, because those are quite expensive as well. Everyone in the country wants talented defensive linemen, especially a player who's older and proven, and you're going to have to pay a hefty price to get 1 or 2 of those guys on their team. Notre Dame added Javonte Jean-Baptiste last year. That was a huge hit. Now it's RJ Oben. I think that is going to be a big hit, and I could see them adding 2 more guys next year. But that's too hard to predict, right? We're not going to spend this segment predicting which defensive linemen are going to come over to Notre Dame next season. Let's focus on some of the young guys that they're developing right now in-house. Guys like Devin Houston, Brennan Vernon, Cole Mullins, Sean Sevillano, and Logan Thomas. I don't think any of these guys are going to have a big impact on this year's team, to be honest with you, but I do think that they're going to be very impactful in the long run, and they're going to be some guys that I'm sort of monitoring as the season goes along. Maybe, if they scratch and claw and then get some playing time against some bad teams, it'll be interesting because it'll be like, oh, okay, these guys have made a move, even if they're not big-time contributors on Saturday. Let's look at Devin Houston. He's long, he's talented, but he hasn't really been heard of much because he's dealt with some injuries and he just hasn't really been able to stay on the field for that long. Brennan Vernon is a guy who I'm not particularly high on. If you've been following the show for a while, I know he's a big-time recruit. At the time Notre Dame got him to commit, it was a huge deal because everyone thought he was going to Ohio State. He's from Mentor, Ohio, which is where my mom is from. My aunt went to Mentor. I've got, some ties to that place, and I watched him play before, and I just wasn't particularly sold on Vernon. I know that some people thought he'd come in and make an immediate impact. That has certainly not been the case. Although, in fairness to Brennan Vernon, Notre Dame has not really been able to figure out what position they want him to play. They gave him a shot at end. They're like, okay, that's not really going to work. Now it seems like he's found a home on the interior, and now it's a matter of just getting his body weight and just body in shape to play that type of position. It looks like he had some bad weight to lose, and then he lost too much. Now he's got to gain it back. Anyway, I'm hopeful that down the road, Brennan Vernon can develop into a strong player because I really do want him to succeed given the Northeast Ohio roots. Sean Sevillano is absolutely massive. Like, physically, he is enormous. He kind of reminds me of Lewis Nix, but he does have to shed some of that bad weight. Looks like he's done that already, but made some nice plays in the spring. Maybe I could see him pushing for some playing time at the end of the season. I think he has a lot of conditioning to get figured out still because, again, he's just a really big dude. But I remember when Notre Dame got his commitment, it was sort of a guy like, why are they even taking him? He was barely even on the recruiting radar. Well, then after Notre Dame got him, he had a nice little senior season there, and I think he climbed his way up the recruiting rankings a little bit. And now it looks like he could be an impact player early on in his career. Speaking of impact players, Cole Mullins is another guy whose name has come up a lot, particularly in spring practice. He was out there. He was making plays whenever he had a chance to get out there with some of the backups or things like that. So I think that he could push for playing time maybe earlier than any of these guys, even Devin Houston, who's a year older than him. So that is a name to keep an eye out for. And then Logan Thomas, I think he's eventually going to be really good. Another player who played high school football, or at least his senior year in Northeast Ohio at St. Ed's. Logan Thomas was one of the higher rated guys in his recruiting class, but he has to put on some weight in order for him to get any serious playing time at the college level. I think he's going to do that in time. He was dealing with an injury in the spring, so he has some work to do in the weight room. He's not going to be a factor this season. Pretty obvious redshirt candidate, but down the road, I think he could be a player because he has like the size and the length to be a true threat and a true viper, which is not something that Notre Dame has always been able to get on the recruiting trail. They've had to move guys around and things like that, but Logan Thomas has a chance to be one of those players. They're also going to be bringing in some new freshmen. I'm really excited about Christopher Burgess Jr. He's from Simeon in Chicago, 6'4", 240 pounds. He looks like he could be a really good player. I know I've talked to recruiting insider Brian Smith several times about him, and he's really, really high on him. He thinks that Burgess could eventually be an NFL type of prospect. So that's really exciting and something that I'm definitely going to be following once he makes his way to campus. But admittedly, I don't love the rest of this D-line class. Obviously, it would have been much better if they added Damian Shanklin, the player from Indianapolis, who at one point looked like he was headed to Notre Dame, and then he let his recruiting process go on a little bit longer, maybe got offered a bigger NIL bag, and now he's going to play for Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers. Gordy Solstead and Davion Dixon are two guys they have committed on the defensive line other than Christopher Burgess. They're developmental players. It's going to take some time with those guys. Again, this is a big reason why Notre Dame is going to look to add in the transfer portal to not only add some experienced guys who can contribute right away, but you also need to give these younger guys more time to develop because if you throw them out there a little bit too early, it's not going to be good for anyone. So overall, I think this position is going to go through a big transition after this season, more so than any other unit on the roster. But Al Washington has done a good job of developing his players since he joined the staff, and the Irish have shown a willingness to go out and get talented players in the portal, and they've proven that they have a good eye for talent when it comes to that. So even though I think recruiting must be improved for this position group, in order for it to be elite, you need to start landing guys like Keon Keeley. You need to land Damian Shanklins. You need to land Justin Scotts, even though that recruitment was insane. You need to start landing those top 5-star prospects because really that's the difference between winning a national championship and just making the college football playoff. You need to have elite guys on the defensive line. And to bring it all back to where we started here, I really do believe that Notre Dame has an elite defensive line this year, but it took a while for Cross and Mills to get to that point. You could expedite that process by just getting the best 5 stars every single year, but here's the problem with that. Everyone else is trying to do the same. So it's something that Notre Dame needs to improve upon, but still I think when you look at what this group can do this season, it really is the best unit on the entire roster. They're loaded with their frontline starters. They're old. I mean, just imagine being like a 19-year-old redshirt freshman tackle having to go up against Howard Cross, Riley Mills, RJ Oben, and Jordan Botelho, guys who are literally 5 years older than you, have been in a college weight room way longer than you have, and have really seen it all at the college level. That is what gives me confidence when Notre Dame faces off against Texas A&M, because I do have my concerns about the offensive line. That is well documented, but you know who else has problems in the offensive line? Texas A&M, and they're going to have to go up against one of the best defensive lines in the country. It's going to be a great matchup. I can't wait. Like I said, just over 3 weeks away. It cannot come soon enough. But that is a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish first listen of the day. I'm going to be back tomorrow morning with another mailbag episode, so get your questions in. Last call, drop them in the YouTube comments, tweet me at Locked On Irish, or DM me on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. For your second listen, check out the Locked On College Football Podcast with host Spencer McLaughlin. He does a great job covering the sport from a national perspective. So if you haven't listened to it yet or watched it yet, I encourage you to do so. Also, I encourage you to please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast, and I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place.